This is lesson 11-2, slope of a line for pre-algebra. Your book has some nice drawings on page 545 of positive slope, negative slope, zero slope, and undefined slope. And I recommend that you copy those into your notes. I'll go ahead and try to recreate them right here, though. Okay, a line that goes like this is said to have a positive slope because as you move from left to right, the line goes up. And then you can probably guess that a line like this has a negative slope because as you move from left to right, the line goes down. Then we have a horizontal line which has a zero slope, and a vertical line that has a slope that is said to be undefined. I have trouble remembering the difference between which one's zero and which one's undefined, but if you think about it, this line goes up and down. That starts with a U, up and down, and undefined also starts with a U, so that should help you to remember that. Okay, now you're supposed to tell for numbers 1 and 2 which one of these kinds of slope is represented. So this one should be negative, and this one should be undefined. So that's pretty simple, I think. So the next thing you're going to have to do is find the slope, not just positive, negative, undefined, or zero, but a number that goes with the slope. It tells how much it slants and in what direction, based upon 2 points that are on the line. Any 2 points will define a line. If you connect them, you've got your line. So the question is, what is the slope of the line that contains the point 1, 0 and 2, 4? There are a couple of different formulas for slope. One of them is the change in y over the change in x. Another one is rise over run. And another one is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Now you might think that this one is too messy and these other ones don't look so complicated, but this one is the one you're going to end up using if you are just given 2 points on the line. If you have a drawing, if you actually have the line graphed, you can use rise over run, and we'll come back to that. Okay, so the formula for slope that we're going to use a lot is this one right here, and you need to get that copied into your notes. Slope is represented by the letter M. Don't ask me why. It seems like it ought to be S maybe, but it's M. M is slope, and the formula is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Okay, this formula isn't too bad to work with if you label the different pieces. You need y sub 2, y sub 1, x sub 2, and x sub 1, and let's just label them. The first number in an ordered pair is always an x value, and the second one is always a y value. X sub 1 is just the first x value. X sub 2 is the second x value. Y sub 1 is the first y value, and y sub 2 is the second y value. So now you just plug those things in. So slope is going to equal y sub 2, which is 4, minus y sub 1, which is 0, over x sub 2, which is 2, minus x sub 1, which is 1. And then we can simplify that. 4 minus 0 is 4, and 2 minus 1 is 1. If it's a whole number, go ahead and just put the whole number. So the slope of a line that passes through those 2 points is 4. Okay, let's go ahead and find the slope of a line that passes through these 2 points. We'll start with our formula. M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. These are our x's. These are our y's. First point, second point. Let's go ahead and plug in for those things. Y sub 2 is 1 minus y sub 1 is 4 over x sub 2 is 2 minus x sub 1 is negative 7. Now here's where people mess things up a lot. We need to make sure we subtract negative 7. And you guys know to go and subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. We've also got another negative number here because 1 minus 4 makes negative 3 over 2 plus 7 is 9. And we do need to simplify that, and you should all know that that's negative 1/3. So the slope of a line that passes through those 2 points is negative 1/3. Okay, there are 4 problems in front of you, numbers 4, 5, 8, and 9. Go ahead and use the formula and solve for the slope of those 4 problems. And we'll turn the video back on in a few minutes and check and see how you did. Okay, so number 4 is 1, number 5 is 3/5, number 8 is 0, and number 9 is 1. Notice on 4 and 5, I went ahead and wrote the slope formula down, but by the time you get to 8 and 9, maybe you've sort of got the whole process memorized, and it's not really necessary to write that formula down. This slope formula is just a small piece of what we're going to be getting into, and you must know how to use it. Okay, the directions for this one say to use the graph of the line to find the slope of the line. Now here's the part where people have trouble. You have to find a point on the line where 2 of the grid lines cross. Now for this line, it's very easy because it crosses grid lines all over the place. What I mean by that is, here's the grid, and where 2 lines cross, is there a point on the line? Well, there's a point on the line, on the grid lines. Here's another point on the grid lines. They're all over the place. Okay, so all I have to do is find 2 points that are identifiable. I know what the coordinates of this point are. Now here's where we're going to use the formula rise over run. So when you're looking at the graph of something, you can find the slope very simply using rise over run. I like to start with the point that's lower, so we actually have a rise. So I rise 1, and the run is actually negative 1 because it's going in the negative direction, 1 over negative 1. And so I can see that my slope then that simplifies to negative 1. A lot of times people forget about the negative, but as you look at this line, we learned at the very beginning of this lesson, if a line goes down as you move from left to right, then the answer to the slope has got to be negative. Okay, so again, we're going to use the graph to determine the slope of the line. We need to find 2 points on the line where grid lines cross, and I see one right here, so we're going to choose this point, and then I need another one. I just keep going until I find one. Here it is. I'm going to start with the formula of rise over run. Start with the lower one, so we actually have rise. Okay, so the rise is 2, and then we're moving to the right in a positive direction, so the run is 1 in a positive direction. And we can see the slope of this line is going to be positive. 2 over 1 simplifies to 2. So the slope of that line is 2. Okay, this next question is pretty complicated, and there are several ways that you can solve it. Let's go ahead and solve each equation for y. We learned to do that in the previous chapter. So let's take the first equation, 5x minus y equals negative 3. We're going to subtract 5x from both sides. That gives us negative y equals negative 5x minus 3. Remember I told you I like that x term to be before the constant term. And we've got negative y, and to get rid of that, we'll multiply both sides by negative 1, the whole side. And in effect, all that does is change all the signs. So that gives us y equals 5x plus 3. Now that we've got it in this form, where we've got y equals some x term plus 3, we can identify the slope very easily. The slope is 5. It's the number that comes in front of the x. That's called the coefficient. The coefficient of x is the slope. So for this one, m equals 5. That one was pretty easy. This one's going to be a little bit more difficult because our y has a coefficient here. Okay, so we have determined that the slope of this line right here is 5. And now we're going to solve for y with this one and see what the slope of that line is. X plus 5y equals 5. We're trying to get y by itself. We'll subtract x from both sides. That leaves me with 5y equals negative x plus 5. Remember, I like that x term first. Now we have to divide both sides by 5. We have to divide the entire side by 5. That leaves us with y equals, and remember, we have to split this thing up. So that's negative x over 5 plus 5 over 5, which equals, move that over here. Okay. Y equals, this piece right here, I'd like to call that negative 1/5 x, and plus 5 over 5 is plus 1. So now we've got this line in slope-intercept form, and then we can pull the slope out of it. It's the number in front of the x, the coefficient of x. So the slope of this line is negative 1/5. Now we learned in a previous chapter, but it was a really long time ago, that if two lines have a slope that is a negative, that are negative reciprocals of each other, then the lines are perpendicular. 5 and negative 1/5, 5 is not a fraction, but we can make it a fraction. 5 over 1 and negative 1/5 are negative reciprocals of each other. Therefore, those two lines are perpendicular. All that to answer that one little question. Now, if you came up with an answer of 5 and 5, then the lines would be parallel. You need to put in your notes, and this is in your book, you need to put in your notes that if two lines have the same slope, they are parallel. And if the slopes of two lines are negative reciprocals of each other, then those two lines are perpendicular. On your homework today, you're going to get some questions that look like this. Tell whether the lines passing through the given points are parallel or perpendicular. Same question like we just did, except for they give you 2 points on the line. So you can just use the slope formula with x sub 1 and y sub 1 and x sub 2 and y sub 2 and plug them into the slope formula. You'll get a slope for line 1, a slope for line 2. If they're the same, then they're parallel. If they're negative reciprocals of each other, then they are perpendicular. On your homework, you may be asked to tell whether the lines passing through the given points are parallel or perpendicular. This is much easier than the previous problem. They give you 2 points, so just use the slope formula, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Once you get your slopes, if they're the same, the lines are parallel. If they're negative reciprocals of each other, then they are perpendicular. You may also be asked to graph a line passing through a point with a certain slope. So you find the point negative 2, 5, negative 2, 5 is right here. And then your slope is negative 2, just put it over a 1, so it's a fraction. And then use rise over run. Negative 2 is the rise, which means down 2. And then the run is 1 to the right. Down 2, 1 to the right. Down 2, 1 to the right. Connect your lines, and connect your dots, and you've got your line. Same deal over here. The point is over 1, down 2. And then it's rise over run. Up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. Connect your points, and you've got your line.